Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues!
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we are all 100% healthy again. Yeah. I am Lauren Humphries Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
Are you 100% healthy, Karen?
I'm like 90% healthy.
Well, that's better than it was last week.
Oh, very much so, yes.
So
It
yes,
was a rough week.
Poor Karen was sick last week. That's why we didn't have an episode. And obviously what she really wanted was to just avoid talking about this film. That's what it was. It's pure Edwardian homophobia. That's really what's going on here. But joke's on her because we're still going to talk about it. But other than being sick, which I'm very sorry you were, Karen, how has your week been?
It was good. I mean, I was homesick from work most of the week, so I didn't do much besides just sit on my couch and watch a lot of TV. So that was great. The second season of Andor, I'm allowed to talk about this now. The second season of Andor is coming out. By the time people are listening to this, it should be out. And I was tasked with reviewing it, and I started to watch the first episode and went, oh, I don't actually really remember what happened last season. So then I had to watch all of the first season and then all of the second season in like 2 days. So, and that is 24 episodes of hour-long television.
Wow, that's a lot, actually.
That was so much.
Yeah, and especially in this day and age where you know we're lucky if we get 8 episodes of something.
Yeah. Well, and like even for shows that are 12 episodes long, which is becoming very rare, they usually don't give the whole season to critics. Usually you're trying to write your review based on like 4. In The Handmaid's Tale, they gave us 8 out of 10. But this one they gave us all 12, and the first season was 12 episodes, and yes, it was a lot. I've been very immersed in the world of Star Wars this week.
Wow.
Which at least the show is really good, so
that's
it
good.
made it easier. It wasn't a slog to get through. It was just a lot of immersion. But I will say, anybody who has been watching the show who enjoyed the first season, Andor season 2 is so good. It's even better. And I feel like part of that is just because of the craft and the quality of the writing and the acting. Everything that made the first season so good is just even better the second time around. But it also in very concerning ways really speaks to where we are right now, and I don't even know that was intentional. I mean, they started working on the show a couple of years ago. The world looked a little different than it has the last couple of months, but it really is all leading up to the events of Rogue One, and it's kind of this line in the sand. Like, what are you willing to do to fight for what's right? And so I think that experience just made season 2 kind of even more immersive in a way. So yeah, very well done.
Interesting.
That's been my week.
That's a good recommendation. No, I mean my week has been good. Because we had to put this off, I watched a whole bunch of random films, including I was looking at my Letterboxd setup, and I was like, I've been watching some just very interesting films this week.
Well, now I got to look at your Letterboxd. Hold on.
So I carrying on the theme of what we're talking about this week, I watched Queer, the new Luca Guadagnino film about based on the William S. Burroughs novel starring Daniel Craig.
With Daniel Craig, yeah.
Yeah, with Daniel Craig. It's a very good film. Guadagnino, I think, is a fantastic filmmaker. He always makes interesting films, even when they don't completely work, and even when they're a bit messy and everything. So I think it's a film that's very worth watching. I also watched like Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which is one of my favorite films, but I was just like, I've watched Hedwig in a while, I'll watch that. And then I watched Fassbinder's Querelle the other day, which again, incredibly like over the top gay movie, basically. And I was like, this should be forming a pattern. It's not intentional particularly. And then in the middle of all of that, I watched One of Them Days, which I highly recommend. I said to you, Karen, on our Slack, that it's going on my list of like perfect films about female friendship. And it really is. It's a delightful film. It's very funny. Like the two leads are great together, and it was just delightful. I had a good time.
I need to watch it tonight.
It's fun. It's really a lot of fun. Like it actually, I was kind of expecting it to be more like raunchy humor girls trip kind of thing, and it's actually not. I mean, there's definitely that element to it, but it's really about their friendship, like, and in like this very sweet and deeper way. Like I honestly did not, I expected it to be this sort of raunchy, kind of road trippy sort of comedy, and it's that, but it's got a lot more to it as well. I really liked it.
I'm excited. Yeah. It was one of those movies where I missed it when it came out. It was a January release, and I mean, there was just a lot happening in January. And so I didn't end up getting to see it. And I wasn't that worried about it because it was a January movie. And then when it came out and everybody started saying, this is actually really good, I was bummed that I missed it. So I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's loads of fun. I do recommend it. So that's what we've been doing this week while we've been off. But now we are going to discuss the film that we were going to chat about last week, which is yet another romantic film from 1987. And this one is, I think, kind of the odd one out in terms of the list that we compiled, not particularly intentionly. First of all,
definitely
this is
not a comedy.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is not a comedy.
No.
At all. But although there's some comedic aspects in it, but it's definitely a drama. It's definitely a very serious film in a lot of ways. And it is also a queer film. It is about homosexual relationships in Edwardian England. And so this is Maurice from 1987, starring James Wilby, Hugh Grant, Rupert Graves. It's a fantastic cast. Denham Elliott, Simon Callow, and this is directed by James Ivory, and it's part of the sort of Merchant Ivory kind of tag team, who of course did stuff like Howard's End, Passage to India, or not Passage to India, Howard's End, Remains of the Day. And this one, I think very often it's treated as sort of a secondary entry into the Merchant Ivory group of films, in part because it's a little bit unwieldy. It's based on a novel by E.M. Forster, which he wrote in, I'm just being certain I get all of the dates right. So he wrote this in 1913, 1914. He revised it numerous times up until the 60s, actually. And the book wasn't actually published until 1971 after Forster had died. So you've got this story that is quite shocking in a lot of ways, quite shockingly explicit about male homosexual relationships in this time period, that was written within the time period, but really wasn't published until much, much later. And then you get this film being produced in 1987, which, takes the book kind of at its value and really explores these relationships and develops them, and is pretty much faithful to the novel, with a few smaller changes, and particularly, which we'll talk about in terms of one of the characters who actually gets arrested for solicitation, for homosexual solicitation. And so before we kind of get into that, what did you think of this film, Karen? Was this the first time that you saw it?
It was. Yeah, I had never watched it before, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't. I've never read the book either, and I didn't really know the story, and so I wasn't sure what I was getting into when I started watching it, which a lot of times I prefer. I like to go into movies as blind as possible, um, because I want to just judge it based on what it is rather than what on everybody tells me it is, And I, when it started, I was just like, this, this is an interesting experience because it especially in light of the other films that we're talking about this month, these romantic movies from 1987, three of which are funny, they are happy, and this one starts, and I was like, oh no, is this just going to be 2 hours of just watching people be miserable?
Yeah, yeah, go on.
And there is a lot of that, but it's not only that. And so I was really glad. So overall, I really liked this, and I was glad that we did it. I'm glad that we had a reason for me to watch it,
Yeah, I had suggested this because I realized that all of the other films we were talking about were heterosexual romances.
Yes.
And although I think when we get to The Princess Bride, we could talk about some of the queer subtext there, because that's definitely present.
Yes.
But they're all heterosexual romances, and they're all kind of all three of the other films we're talking about, they're all sort of these fairy tales. Princess Bride is quite explicitly a fairy tale. Moonstruck has this fairy tale aspect to it, and Roxanne is based on Cyrano de Bergerac.
Right.
And so you've got these sort of fairy tale aspects that are going into these straight films. And then you've got Maurice, which is a queer film and very queer. And one of the things that I like about Maurice is that, as you say, it isn't just about gay suffering. Like, I don't think that one of the reasons why Forster, supposedly, this is one of the things that he said, was that he felt he couldn't publish the book when he wrote it because he could not envision in reality a happy ending. And I think we should talk about the ending in a little bit later, but that was sort of the approach that he was taking, of like there's so many limitations, legal as well as social. And that's what I like about this one, is that it goes into the social and cultural ramifications of being a gay man, an upper class gay man. All of these men are like upper middle class, gentry class, etc. But so it goes into the kind of social ramifications of that and the reality of it. So it isn't just, it's not legal, right? And it can be punished there can be a lot of very harsh punishments. The film is taking place not that long after Oscar Wilde's trial. But so there's not just these legal ramifications, but the social and cultural fallout, both for the individual and for the individual's psychology and emotions, and for the world at large. So it isn't just you can get arrested for this. It's like there are all kinds of other, it can destroy your life, literally, to be found out, essentially.
Yeah, this is maybe going to be a weird thing to talk about here, but last night I was at Disneyland because I have a magic key and I go all the time. But anyway, so last night I was there, and there's this area, it's just like a lot of tables and stuff. It's near some food, and I was by myself, and I just, I sat at a table. There were lots of families around and stuff. And so I was just sitting there, I was on my phone, and I was getting ready to get up and leave. And there were like 4 just empty chairs sitting at this table. And so this guy comes up to me, and he said, "Are you waiting for people?" And I was like, no, it's fine. I thought he just wanted to take the chair. And he goes, "Can we sit here?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, that's no problem. I was getting ready to leave anyway." He goes, No, there's live music about to start." And anyway, so his friends joined him, one of which was his husband, So he's very, he's very excited. He introduces me to his husband. I don't know these people. They, like, and this was about 20 minutes that we all sat at this table. There was some music, and then we all went our separate ways. But anyway, the other two friends that joined them were a trans woman and another friend of theirs that is married to this woman. And so it was just like this just group of queer people that were so much fun and so, just so delightful. And I was thinking about how much the world has changed, that you can just approach a stranger and be like, "Hi, I'm Alex and this is my husband," and how wonderful that is. At the same time, we also still see these people's lives under attack, and we still see so many things that we explore in this movie that are not acceptable. I mean, this interaction was able to happen because I'm in California, and you just do what you want to do in California not for the most part, but to a large extent. And you just, you can be more unapologetically who you are here. There is that assumption of freedom to do so, but there's still a lot of parts of this country where that group of 4 people would not have been able to just approach a stranger and sit down and share a drink and have a good time. And that's one of the things that I thought about while I was watching this movie, was how much has changed in the last 100 years and how much has not.
Well, and I think that that's something that is important about Maurice as well. So this is a film that is set in the turn of the century, early 1900s in England, right? It's made in 1987, so this is also kind of the height of the AIDS crisis. It deals not just with the explicitness, not just with an explicit romance. So not solely with sex and sexuality, but the emotions that are attached to that and the complexities of the philosophy attached to that. And it unpacks these cultural attitudes, these beliefs, this whole idea of illness. There is one of the toughest scenes in the film, I think, is where fairly late in the story, Maurice goes to see a doctor friend of his, and he's literally like, "I want you to examine me because I'm diseased," right? And his doctor friend thinks that he's saying he's got like syphilis or something. And he physically examines his body and says, like, "You're fine, there's something wrong with you," right? And what eventually comes out is that what he's talking about is that he views his homosexuality, his desire for men, as a disease that needs to be investigated and cut out of him in some way. Even as, he's perfectly healthy. But that's one of the attitudes that runs throughout the film, of like homosexuality as this aberration, as this perversity, as a literal physical disease that you can eliminate. And it's not simply this is what is being said from the outside. This is something that Maurice is experiencing within himself. And a lot of the film actually deals with those hang-ups of him experiencing the sensation of being wrong, of being incorrect, and of the relationship that then he has to all of the other characters, and how like he understands, like initially there's this kind of philosophical attachment to the concept of homosexuality. There's a lot of talk about the Greeks. But it's interesting because like even in the initial conversation that they have about the Greeks, and when they're actually beginning to approach this conversation about platonic love, in the Greek sense, even then, like their lecturer is saying like, well, we're not going to talk about that. We're not the vice of the Greeks, right? We're not actually going to talk about what the Greeks were actually writing about, what these philosophers were writing about, which was homosexual love. In a very, structured and in a very different way. And I like that the film spends the time to actually go into that. It's a really serious understanding of the complexities of the society and of the effects that they have on individuals, because it's coming both from outside and from within the psychologies of the people involved. And yeah, and going back to this question of like, that openness. I mean, we're talking about this in 2025. We're talking about a time when gay marriage is a thing. We do not understand homosexuality as being an aberration, particularly, but a lot of people still do. And we're talking about this in a time where the UK Supreme Court has now decided to define women as like on a biological basis. And, it's that I think one of the distressing things in a lot of ways about Maurice is that some of the arguments just like, yeah, we're still having these arguments. We're still having these conversations. Why are we still having these conversations? In, talking about a story that was written in 1913.
Right.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, there's that other side that you're experiencing as well.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And I don't want to paint this picture of everything's rosy in California and
Yeah.
all the queer people should just move here because everything's great, because that's absolutely not the case. There are definitely still problems. But yeah, I mean, just the world at large right now, there's, sexuality and gender are under attack, under direct attack. And that's where I look at and I feel like a movie like Maurice is, as much as this should feel just like this, oh, look at this, interesting look at love, 100 years ago, it's actually surprisingly relevant today. And I think that's really unfortunate. Obviously, well, that's like such an understatement. It shouldn't be like this. We should be at a point now where we can just accept people for who they are. And the court case this week in UK, the things that we're facing right now in the United States, the threats against against large segments of the population, it's I guess what I don't know. I'm not even sure what I'm trying to say right now, but I just, that you referenced to the scene toward the end of the movie where he goes to the doctor and wants to be fixed, wants to be healed because of this perception of obviously there's something wrong with me. And I think that in a lot of ways we've gotten past that part for people, like for individuals. They know there's nothing wrong with them, I think, hopefully now. But we still have this societal, overwhelming, pervasive, oh, well, if you are trans, then no, you're not, and there's something wrong with you. Like that's still very much part of the conversation.
Well, but I mean, and that's the thing in a lot of ways. Some of the things, when in watching Maurice, some of the things that are being said about gay men, and this is dealing exclusively with gay men. They don't even address the questions of female homosexuality at all. Right. And nor is there what I know was an attitude in the turn of the century, which is this idea of homosexuality, not necessarily as being a disease, but as being actually what we would call transness, which would be men acting as women, women acting as men. Yeah. Because that was the understanding about sexual roles and about gender roles. And you're talking about a society where these roles were even more stratified than they are today. And in fact, I recently, a couple of years ago, or last year, actually, I finished reading all of Proust. But there's there's a huge section of Proust that actually directly deals with homosexuality and homosexual society in the turn of the century in Paris, in France. And this is being written by a closeted gay man, by the way, who's gay, but is like, no, I'm totally not gay. Let me tell you everything about homosexual society that I definitely don't know about. But what's interesting about it is that that's one of the elements that keeps on getting repeated, is this idea of particularly in reference to men, but men who act as women. And a lot of that is coming out of this Greek philosophy and this Greek understanding of homosexuality, which sort of posits the older man, the teacher, et cetera, and the young boy. and that there are men who are women and then men who are men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because Maurice has a little bit of that, but particularly when we were initially introduced to the relationship between him and Clive. So Maurice is played by James Wilby and Clive is played by Hugh Grant, and they meet as students at Cambridge. And they form this, what would be described in literature as a passionate friendship. But they form this really close friendship, and it obviously turns into a homosexual relationship. But one of the things that struck me in this watch, and that I realized I hadn't really realized the first time I saw the film, is that there's a strong implication that they never actually have sex. That their initial contact is, and Clive even says at one point, because Maurice is like kissing him, he's opening his shirt. And Clive even says, like, oh no, I want to keep this, we need to maintain the purity of our relationship. And so there's this attitude that is very much coming from that turn of the century understanding of homosexuality, of the relationship between men is purer in some ways than the relationships between men and women, which are by necessity sexual. And that they are kind of keeping Clive especially wants to keep their relationship at this heightened level of purity, because it's more transcendental in some ways than, if they were to actually give in to their desires, etc., if they were to actually give in to sensuality. So there's this divide that's happening between sensuality and this kind of the purity of this masculine relationship. And it's implied that goes all the way through that, and that part of Maurice's struggle in particular is that he has sexual desires. He sexually desires men. He is a gay man. That's not something that he expressly voices, but it's obvious that it's contained in that. And he's not getting that part of his relationship with Clive because they're maintaining this distance. I don't know if you had thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, and that's where, because so much of the film is the two of them and it's their story. And I mean, it's Maurice's story, but he spends so much time with Clive. And that was where, as I was watching it, I just thought, when is this going to get happy? Because watching him be kept physically at a distance from someone that he has such a deep connection with, it was really heartbreaking to watch that, and to watch him be rejected multiple times, when he's trying to get closer, and watching Clive just like sometimes physically put up a hand and like, no, we're not doing that. And it just was like, it was so sad to watch this. And I just thought, oh man, this poor guy, there's someone else out there for you, buddy. And not knowing where this was going, I was thinking that. I was like, don't waste your time with this fool. But yeah, I forgot what your question was.
Well, so it's just about this, like a lot of the film is about the relationship between Maurice and Clive.
Yeah.
But this relationship is not, I don't even know how to describe it, because it's not non-sexual, because it is sexual. Like, Maurice desires him. Maurice desires
it's
men.
Unconsummated.
Yeah, it's unconsummated. There we go. But it's intentionally so. It's not like, oh, they never have an opportunity. It's more like Clive has put up this barrier. And I think that there is an indication through the film that Clive thinks or has a certain degree of awareness that eventually this relationship is going to come to an end and he's going to get married and have children. That's like a reality that he knows exists and maybe is discontented with, but is simply something that, like, that's his assumption throughout the entire film.
Well, and it makes sense because of the fact that he was his father's heir. His father died when he was, young. I missed exactly. I don't know if it even says how old he was when his father died, but he is the heir, and there are expectations that come with that role. And, and I mean, there's the scene where his mom is even going over kind of a checklist, like sort of, here's his life timeline. and at some point he's going to be in the House of Lords, and
Mhm.
all the things that are pre-decided, like those things were decided the moment he came out a boy, and um and so he has grown up surrounded by a complete inability to decide anything for his own life. The only real control he has is deciding which girl he's going to marry. That's really it.
Yeah.
And we see this reinforced with their friend, who is also, in a similar position and gets caught and
Mhm.
arrested. And that reinforces anything that Clive might have been considering, like maybe I could, you know, pursue this a little bit more. That goes out the window as soon as their friend gets arrested.
Yeah, Lord Risley, who, and this is one of the points of departure from the novel, where there's a lot more made of that, and of Clive in particular. Clive goes to the trial, and sees him sentenced. And he's sentenced to 6 months hard labor, right?
Mhm.
And I think it should be noted that, like, this was something that Oscar Wilde was also sentenced to. This hard labor is hard labor. Like, it's not. This isn't a cushy sentence, particularly. But what's also reinforced in particular in that scene, and it's something that the judge explicitly says, is his life is destroyed.
Yeah.
So he was in the House of Lords. He was even like a secretary to the prime minister. And what's being enforced there is he is losing everything. He's losing his social standing. He's losing his cultural standing. He has lost all of his friends. No one really, like Clive himself, will not acknowledge relationship to this man. Like, that won't acknowledge the fact that he knows him even.
Keeps trying to be hidden in the courtroom, doesn't want anybody to see him there at the sentencing.
And so his entire life, right, beyond simply the legal sentence that has been passed down on him, his entire life has been completely destroyed. Because he's gay, basically, because he was caught soliciting a soldier, and
Who set him up for money from the cops.
Yeah, exactly. Who set him up. And so that incident is kind of what then drives Clive to begin breaking it off with Maurice. And one of the tragedies, I think that there are a couple of tragedies in the film, and one of the tragedies is, I think, Clive. And it's because this is all being told from Maurice's perspective, we don't really know where Clive kind of falls. But Clive essentially convinces himself that this was a fun time that we had, and now we're going to be adults and be straight. Like, that's basically what he tells Maurice at one point. That he even repeats one of the phrases that comes up a lot in stories like this, which is, wouldn't it be easier? It'd be so much easier if we were just not like this. And it's heartbreaking because Clive is denying this huge part of himself. And whether that means, he could be bisexual, he could be a just incredibly closeted gay man. But he's denying all of the desires and impulses and hope for a life outside of all of this, because he is afraid of losing his social standing. And the film treats it, I think that it treats these fears as being very sympathetic, because it isn't just, you're stupid, why don't you just like run off together or whatever. It's like, that's a really hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're in this entire society where everything, and like, as you point out, Clive has grown up with this expectation of what he's going to be, who he is, all of the rules that accompany his position, all of the things that he has been taught to want and that he does want. And essentially it's like, if he gives that up, he gives up everything. If he decides that he is going to actually be in any sense, an out gay man, he is giving up, like, he has to run away, essentially. They have to leave England. And it's sad. And it is at that level, it's it is an attack on that society that creates this world in which these men are not allowed to be who they are at all.
Right. I mean, Clive even goes all the way to Greece and still can't be who he is,
Yeah. Yeah, he convinces himself, he tells himself that like, oh, now I'm straight. It's like, you're not, buddy.
No, no, it doesn't work like that.
And it's heartbreaking because then he kind of, he turns against Maurice, and Maurice has this, I think he has got a certain degree of naivete, and I think that some of it is a result of his own class position. Because he's slightly lower class. He is like Clive, he is kind of the only son of the family. He's the only son of a family of women.
Yeah.
And so is required to be certain things. He's required to be the breadwinner. He is, really he should be being certain that his sisters get properly married off, all of those things. And meanwhile he is living this other life that is acceptable to a point. It's acceptable that he lives with another young man, but eventually the expectation is, you're going to get married, you're going to have children, you're going to do all of the things. And it's something that Maurice in particular, even more so than Clive, cannot reconcile himself to. He can't really suppress that part of himself.
Yeah, which I think is partly because of the fact that yes, he is in a similar situation to Clive, but not the same. He's not inheriting like a dukedom or whatever they would call it. He's not titled. And he hasn't been raised with the same type of life plan made out for himself. It's just you're gonna go to college and then you're gonna get a good job, basically is his life plan. And so it is a little bit different because he hasn't had to envision a world where he has to get married and he has to have heirs, or anything like that.
Yeah, although so it becomes more personal in a lot of ways. I mean, the entire film starts with him as a boy speaking to the headmaster or not the headmaster, like the one of his teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his teacher is essentially giving him the talk. Yes, because he finds
his
out
dad's not around to do it.
Because he doesn't have any male relatives. Like he even asks him, just like, do you have any like male relatives, dad, uncle? It's like, no. Okay. So he gives him this very confusing, honestly, talk about sexuality and about desire. And it's about heterosexuality and like, this is what'll happen to your body as you get older, right? And I have to say, just that poor kid. Okay.
Kudos to Simon Callow, though, the way he delivers those. I love Simon Callow, and the way he delivers that whole thing is so funny. I love him.
Well, and at the end of it, Maurice even says, like, well, I don't think I will get married.
Yeah. And he's like 12.
And the his teacher laughs at him, and this comes up a couple of times throughout, of like people kind of laughing about that, of being like, oh, well, you'll understand when you get older, when you meet the right woman, you'll just and I mean, how many times have we even heard that in our contemporary moment of like, oh, it's just a phase, when you grow up and meet the right person, it's always a woman or it's always a man. Mm-hmm. You'll change your mind about that, and of course then Maurice does grow up and he's just like, no, I'm not going to get married.
Yeah.
But it is this like shaping of this is what sexuality is and this is what it is meant for. And it is that, meant for not just reproduction, but for the kind of perpetuation of the society itself. That's part of what both of them are being pressured into. And Clive even more so, of like, you have to get married and you have to pass on the title, you have to have children. These are all of the things that you are expected to do and expected to be as a member of this society in order to be a good member of the British Empire. Like, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
And particularly in terms of this class. So I think that class comes in so much because there is this attitude of the upper, like, even when Lord Risley is caught, right? There's this whole speech that I think the judge gives about the corruption of the lesser orders, right? He talks about this, like, this paternalism of men of the upper class are required to be better examples, right? Are required to not corrupt the lesser people, like the people, and it's implied that they are, the lower classes, they're dumber, they're more sensual, they're more akin to animals. And that it is the role of the upper class male to, not corrupt them and to keep them pure, etc. So there is this attitude about class relations as well. And then this feeds a little bit, or feeds directly into Maurice's developing a relationship with Scudder, played by, what's his name, Rupert.
Oh, who plays Scudder? Sorry, I don't have
Rupert Graves.
Yes.
Rupert Graves. So he was this young gamekeeper on Clive's family estate, and that is interested in Maurice, but Maurice for a lot of the film just doesn't even notice him, like barely even registers his existence, beyond just him being like this guy who's like carrying around a gun behind him. But one of the things that kind of then builds is the sensuality of that relationship. Is Scudder, like, we have a scene where Scudder actually watches Maurice flinging open like his window and sticking his head out into the rain, and like having these emotional moments that we don't see from the British upper classes. Having these moments of release and of sensuality that has been associated with the lower classes as being something that is acceptable, but that is also animalistic or bestial. So I don't know if you had thoughts on that. I'm talking a lot.
I don't know, not on that scene in particular, but just on the
relationships,
the relationship as it, because it is interesting because Scudder is there, but he's in the background. You don't really pay much attention to him, and then it's like as soon as Maurice is in a situation where he really faces that he has to let go of Clive, that's when his eyes are open and he's able to see that this other person is there. And it's like, what I liked about that is how true to life that is for so many of us. You just get so focused on one person that you can't see that there's someone that's even better for you, just right right there, if you would just pay attention and stop fixating on somebody who clearly is never gonna choose you. And I feel like that's exactly what happens with Maurice, is as soon as he is able to let go of this connection he has with Clive, and they do have a connection, like I understand why he holds on to that for so long, but when he finally gets to the point where he understands this is never going to happen, it does free him up. And I think that when I was watching it, I worried because for one thing, I didn't know how much longer the movie was, but I worried that it was going to be a situation of like, okay, I can't have the person that I want, so I'm going to take the person that I can have. But I don't feel like it.
No,
I don't feel like it develops that way at all. I feel like it becomes a really true, beautiful, relationship that Maurice is able to have with Scudder. And I really do think that so much of that is because he's able to let go of these misguided, I don't know, hopes.
Well, and it's also, he goes through the entire process of like, he goes to a hypnotist to try to, played by Ben Kingsley, to try to like basically convince himself that he's straight. So he goes to essentially a Edwardian version of conversion therapy. Like that's essentially what's happening.
Yeah.
And even then, I like, there's a scene where the hypnotist essentially says like, I really suggest you go to another country. Like that's where it's a little bit funny if like, but it's just like, leave England, go to France or Italy where homosexuality is not criminalized. Where you can actually be free, more free, not entirely free, but more free. And there is that of like, it so much of the film is a process of Maurice accepting himself and also accepting these sexual elements of it. So I think that's where the role of Scudder also comes in, because they have sex almost immediately. Like they have this intense, like almost nonverbal connection with each other. And then they have sex, and it's like one of the few times and throughout the film that Maurice seems actually happy. Like he's actually like, oh, this was fun. This is actually something that I wanted to do. And his relationship with Clive has been so tortured in a lot of ways is because he does have sexual desires and he's not allowed to act on them with the person that he wants to. And with Scudder, they are able to act on that with each other. And I like that it isn't solely that. It isn't like, oh, now he's found this, lower class boy that he can have sex with. It is a much more romantic relationship. It is this deep connection. But a part of that is about their sexuality, their like actual sexual relationship, which is something that we've seen Maurice in particular has been struggling with the entire film.
Yeah.
So we did have a question about the ending. And this comes from Noelle, and I asked her if it would be okay if I read this out on air. So here we go. And I think that this is a really good question. Do you view Maurice as a happy ending? I wonder because the author wrote it and viewed it as one, and I think the film frames it as one. Clive is set up as the tragic one who's forced to be miserable, even though he's upper class, because he chooses not to be himself and hide his sexuality. While Scudder and Maurice are together and choosing their love and sexuality, but give up their respective positions in society. But there's the argument that it isn't a happy ending, because in order for someone to be happy, they have to move and give up their wealth in society. So I have thoughts. What are your thoughts, Karen? Is this a happy ending? Is this an ambiguous one?
First of all, I think this is a great question. And it's one that I actually just read it this morning. But it's one I've been thinking about since I watched the movie. And I would say that, and maybe this is a non-answer, but I would say it's as happy an ending as could happen for these characters in this time period and at the time that the book was written, even at the time the book was published. Not necessarily when the movie was made. Well, even then, in some ways. So I think that the question of whether it's a happy ending is very what's the word I'm looking for? Hold on.
Loaded.
Sorry.
Loaded.
That wasn't the word I was looking for, but but yeah, I think that there's a spectrum, and I think that it's not so easy to say, because obviously a really happy ending would be Maurice and Scudder come out and they're like, hey, we're in love, and everyone's like, cool, let's have a party, like that would be a really happy ending.
Yeah, completely unrealistic. Like it wouldn't happen. Exactly.
So I think that it's like in degrees, it's a scale, it's a spectrum, like so many things are. So I think that in terms of our worldview now, no, it's not as, it's like it's a bittersweet ending. But I think that in terms of what their reality is, I think, yes, it is happy. It's happy for Maurice. Obviously not a happy ending for Clive, because he is very constricted and stuck in this life that was chosen for him. And he's not willing to let that go so that he can have whatever it is that he wants. Or maybe he decides that he really does. I don't know. Maybe he really does want this life that he's born into.
Yeah.
And he's willing, to give up so much for it. Maybe. I don't know. But I think for Maurice, yes, I would say it's as happy an ending as he could possibly have.
Yeah, that's exactly my thinking as well. It's the happy ending for the society that the film depicts, and it's a pretty accurate depiction from everything that I understand about that society. And I think one of the places where we're meant to understand it as a happy ending for Maurice, and I think we're meant to also maybe be a little bit angry about it, but one of the things that the film reinforces over and over is that attempting to suppress who you are in terms of your sexuality is what destroys people. The reason why Clive's ending feels tragic, and it does feel tragic, it doesn't feel happy, is because he has everything that he is supposed to have. He has the wife, he's probably going to have children, he has the social position, he has money, he has everything, right? And it feels tragic.
Yeah.
Because and you've got that final conversation that Maurice and Clive have, and it's this point where Maurice is like, I'm going to embrace who I am. And what's unfair about it is that Maurice is not going to have any of those things. Him and Scudder probably are going to have to leave the country if they want to be together in any way. They probably are going to have a difficult time of it, right? But it is still portrayed as being much happier, because throughout this whole film, we've seen people completely destroying who they are in order to fit into what their society requires of them. And essentially Maurice is saying, I'm not going to do that. I love someone and I'm going to find happiness with them one way or another. And that will be hard and it will be difficult to find that happiness, but it will be worth it. And that's what the film is portraying, is that it's worth it. It also really does drive home the fact that it's not fair. It shouldn't be like that, right?
Right.
They shouldn't have to leave England. They shouldn't have to run off. They shouldn't have to hide. But it is better to do that. It's kind of like, I would rather be out of the closet than in, you know?
Yeah.
I would rather be who I am than lopping off pieces of myself in order to fit into what society tells me I am.
Yeah. There's also a little bit of that. At least there is somewhere that they can go, you know, like there are places that exist where they can go and be together. And I think that's the optimistic part too, where there is hope for a future for these two.
Yeah. Well, and I like that the film doesn't end with them like riding off into the sunset or anything. It's indicated that it's going to be difficult still for them.
Yeah.
But that they've made a choice for each other, and that's joyful, that's happy. And so I do think one of the reasons why I like this film is that for all of the difficulties and the angst and the suffering that the characters go through, there is this joy at the end. There is this, like, you know, it isn't utopian. It isn't like, oh, everything's going to be great now. It's like, no, it's going to be hard, but it's also really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really like that about this film.
It's very good. I'm glad we watched it.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is an interesting, particularly in our time period. And, you know, we talk about like, oh, it's different now. It's like, yeah, is it? Sometimes it's not. And it does depend on where you are, and it depends on your society. It depends on where you live. It depends on how you grew up. I mean, because this isn't just about the focus in the film is very much on Maurice's adult life, but it isn't just about that. It's about someone who exists in this society and is shaped by it and influenced by it. He's not simply, you know, this outsider product that has, you know, appeared from nowhere. He is brought up within all of this, and he's got to figure out ways of navigating it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like this film. I will point out that I believe homosexuality was not decriminalized in Britain until 1968.
Yes.
And then this book was published 3 years later.
Wow.
And this film actually, just as a side note, this film reminds me a little bit of a film that was actually made in 1961 called Victim, with Dirk Bogarde, an actor who was gay and who had to be closeted. And it's actually about I think he's a barrister who's suspected of murdering his lover because his lover was blackmailing him. And it's about specifically the cultural issues surrounding the criminalization of homosexuality in Britain, and was one of the films that kind of pushed a number of British politicians to begin looking at the question again, and to be like, you know, this is actually, because it goes into the destruction of lives that isn't solely about legality or criminality, but about the lengths to which people go to conceal these relationships and the damage that it does to individuals and to the society at large. And it actually is credited as being a film that pushed for the eventual decriminalization of homosexuality.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so remember this, and also 1987, height of the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
A lot of discussions about, criminality and depravity and degradation and all sorts of horrible things being attached to, particularly to gay men, but to gay people generally. And it wasn't that long ago. I was born into it.
Yeah, this was during both of our lifetimes.
Yep. So I think that will close us out. Any final thoughts on Maurice before we close this, Karen?
No, just if you haven't seen it, watch it. We both had different. You watched it on Tubi, I watched it on Canopy. I think it's also available on Fandango at home, like different places.
Yeah, it's rentable, and I watched it on Tubi because I don't have access to Canopy. But if you can watch it on Canopy, definitely do that because no commercials.
Yeah.
All right, so that will close us off for this week. Next week, I'm excited about this. We are going to talk about The Princess Bride.
Yes.
I can't believe that we have managed to not talk about The Princess Bride all of these years, but we haven't.
I don't think we've ever even mentioned The Princess Bride, because when we were talking about it, your reaction to it, I was surprised. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah.
What's my reaction?
Well, just like you were excited, and I don't know if I even knew you'd ever seen it.
Bitch, I grew up with Princess Bride.
Princess
Bride. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Like, I'm looking for the six-fingered man. Like,
it's a perfect movie. I love it so much. I have the Criterion disc, so
I really should get the Criterion. It's, you know what? It's one of those I feel like that has just been in the background of my childhood, because like everybody has seen The Princess Bride. Of like our two generations, I think everyone has seen it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, The Princess Bride, of course, that's just a film that everyone has seen. Like, it's not even, you don't even really think about it because it's just there all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be, it's been a long time since I've seen it actually, so I think it would be fun to revisit as well.
Well, there you go.
So we'll be talking about The Princess Bride next week, so definitely prep for that. If you haven't seen it recently, watch it again. And of course, we want to thank our wonderful and lovely patrons, who include Abby, Audra, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Ferdinand, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, MK, Monty, Nanina, Noel, Robert, Steve, and Sharon. And we should have some new bonus episodes coming up for you guys pretty soon. We kind of got thrown off because of everything, but we should be back on track.
Disease.
Because Karen was partying too hard and got a sore throat. Yep. That is what I'm gonna say.
That's definitely not gonna start rumors.
You're hard partying, Karen. You're a hard partier.
That's what I do. At Disneyland.
At Disneyland. See, you're hanging out with the queer people at Disneyland, just like going wild. It's like, oh no, I'm sick.
I deserve to be punished with illness.
Jeez. So if you do want to join our Patreon, we are really grateful for it. And you do get bonus episodes and fun little things as well. Our Patreon is patreon.com/citizendame. You can also throw us a couple of dollars if you'd like to. That's ko-fi.com/citizendame. And we also have our website, citizendamepod.com, where we've got articles and reviews. And you can also get in touch with us a couple of different ways. We are on the emails, citizendamepod@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, we love getting questions and comments. It's a lot of fun. Please send us an email, and as long as you're being polite, we'll do our best. And yes. Of course, we are on all of the various socials. We are on Instagram and Blue Sky at Citizen Dame Pod. And we are on Letterboxd at Citizen Dame, and those should be properly updated now. I hope. Maybe I got to check everything again.
I don't know.
But we are on a Letterboxd. We are Letterboxd HQ, so definitely give us a follow there, and yeah, come check us out. And of course, you could get in touch with us individually. Karen, where are you?
I am on Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Instagram and Letterboxd at LH Business. And thank you so much for listening. We will talk to y'all later.
Bye.
God's wondrous books. Your body is his temple, and you must never, ever pollute that temple.
That's all right, Scudder.
What sort of a life would I have without you? I risk everything, and gladly, because the one thing I dread losing is you. You're the only happiness there is for me.
There are other ways to be happy, you know. We could explore those a little.
Not for me.